let's get to what we want to get to, examining the Deshaun Watson trade. This clip we're going to play is a kind of a response we did on last Friday's show. DeMarcus Spears of ESPN said that this is a make or break year for Deshaun Watson. And we kind of broke down and opined on that. Me, Jay Crawford, and Earl the Pearl, we talked to what we felt, whether these comments were in line and how we felt that the season should go. And is this a make or break year for Deshaun Watson? More importantly, when we get back from looking at this sound, I'm gonna debunk this once and for all, and get to the point where we could give you the information to make an informed decision about whether this trade is the worst in NFL history. And let me tell you something. I pulled up some trades in the time machine, and let me tell you something. There are way worse trades than this, but no one seems to remember these trades. So sometimes you got to bring back history. History is a good, a pointer, so we can make a good informed decision on whether or not this whole Deshaun Watson talking point is actually something that has any merit or any teeth. So let's go ahead and check this clip out. This is from last Friday on the Ultimate Cleveland Sports Show on WKYC. If you missed it, make sure you watch us every Friday from 12:30 to 1 p.m. on WKYC.
Comments recently from an old friend of mine, Marcus Spears, recently on our quarterback, Deshaun Watson. These comments made on NFL Live. Listen.
I don't know if he's ever going to return to the player in Houston. That player in Houston was a guy we had on the same pedestal with Patrick Mahomes. I'm not sure if he ever gets back to that point with his production and the things he was doing. This is a show me year for Deshaun Watson. And look, unfortunately, his availability has been rocked by some injuries, significant injuries, by the way, that you can't perform with. But you said it, Tim, 5-year, $230 million, that's a financial anchor. We going to be the hell with that anchor if he don't perform well or if he's unavailable. Listen, this is the National Football League. And I get it. We've had a lot of nuance and a lot of discussion about Deshaun Watson getting back to the point where he's playing at a high level. He has to play at a high level this year. This is the year of demarcation for Deshaun Watson, if this was a good investment or not. And if not, unfortunately for the Cleveland Browns, it's going to look like the worst acquisition that we've seen in this league probably ever.
Marcus stole my notes. I mean, I've been saying that. I initially said when we made the deal, if it doesn't work, it'll be the worst trade that we've ever made, amongst the worst that we've seen in the NFL. And I've been saying all this offseason, it's time. And I think you guys agree with that. Now, what we might not agree with is if it doesn't happen next year, there are still 2 more years on the contract. But do they move on if it's a definitive, it didn't happen again?
Well, listen, that's the part I agree with him. I said in the opening, I said, he was right and he was wrong. He is right. If you go back and listen to Deshaun Watson, he's saying that, guess what? For me, I got the same expectation. It ain't no like y'all got higher expectations than me. I expect to go out there and play at a high level, and I think he will. The problem that I have is, first of all, it's not the worst trade in the history of all mankind. Let's be clear. The kid from that came out of South Dakota State. Trey Lance went to the San Francisco 49ers. They gave up 3 first-round picks, and they still went to the Super Bowl. No one says that's a terrible trade, right? Browns went to the playoffs, team at the Super Bowl. But when you talk about it and you talk about the contract and whatever that goes into it, that's the going rate for a quarterback that is a franchise quarterback. So, and right there, we pick up at that point. Because when we always talk about Deshaun Watson, it always comes to this the worst trade. Like it's like you're throwing it in on the top of a cherry on top of the sundae, right? You know what I'm saying? It's a talking point that people and I expect that for the national media, right? Because let's be truthful, bro. Let's be honest. The national media, when you're asking those guys to cover all of these different teams, right? They're covering every 32 NFL teams. You want them to have an opinion on NBA. You want them to have an opinion on Major League Baseball. You want them to have an opinion on college sports. So let's be clear. When they're doing these type shows, these guys aren't spending the majority of their time drilling down on the minutia of local stories with a team. That's why we have beat reporters. So sometimes you can come off as uninformed when you talk about certain things and being the worst trade in NFL history, because you're not putting in all of the time and energy and effort, which is impossible. Let's be clear. You can't cover a team 32 teams with that type of microscope. So what they do is they usually take something from somebody, they hear it, and if you hear it enough times, it just becomes gospel. It becomes the truth. When in reality, all you're doing is regurgitating and talking points that somebody else is saying. And when you talk about the worst trades in history, let's go ahead and talk about what it is that they're talking about in the trades. And so we can talk about whether or not the Deshaun Watson trade equals up to any of these other trades. And I'm going to tell you, these trades that I'm about to show you is terrible. On face value are horrible. But even some would argue are worse than a Deshaun Watson trade. But those trades aren't talked about because people just don't take time to dig in and really drill down on what we're saying. So first and foremost, to establish this, let's talk about what the Cleveland Browns gave up to get Deshaun Watson. We'll examine this a little bit further later down the line, but let's examine. So this is from a couple of years ago, and they talked about it, said back in March of 22, the Cleveland Browns sent a 2022, 2023, and 2024 first-round pick, along with a 2023 third-round pick and a fourth-rounder in 2022 and 2024 to acquire Deshaun Watson's services. Also in the trade, the Browns received a 2024 sixth-round pick, which they used earlier this offseason in a trade to acquire Jerry Jeudy. So that is what they gave up, right? This is the compensation. So you got 3 first-round picks, and a third rounder in 2023 and a fourth rounder in 2024 and 2022. So that's what they gave up, right? In the next segment that we do, we will break down what exactly did the Houston Texans do with these picks and what was the results for those picks. And we'll talk about that coming up in the next break, right? But that's what they gave up. So let's go down through trades that are as equally as garbage and as equally as bad that no one talks about. Let's get to it. Let's look at it. Look, this is from 2022. Broncos trade for Russell Wilson. Broncos failed for years to find a viable quarterback and replacement following Peyton Manning's retirement, leading to them send a massive haul to Seattle for Wilson. Denver traded Drew Lock, Noah Fant, Shelby Harris, who now plays for the Browns, 2 first-round picks, 2 second-round picks, a 5th-round pick to Seattle for Wilson, and a 4th-rounder. Wilson was coming off a down year in Seattle, and things got much worse with his new team going 11-19 as a starter over 2 seasons before being released in March of 2024. Not only did he get released, they had to eat all of that money. So you gave up all of that, and you had to eat that contract that he had that was millions upon millions upon millions, and that was a dead cap hit. Now we talking about how bad the Deshaun Watson trade. Not only is the Deshaun Watson trade has not been anywhere near devastating for the Browns. Not only the Browns have done what they needed to do, they went to the playoffs. They went to the play. That's how good the roster is around Deshaun Watson. They went to the playoffs with backup quarterbacks. Tell me one free agent that they didn't get because they paid Deshaun Watson $234 million. I'm still waiting for that answer. And every time I talk about this, I ask that. So here's one trade that is worse than the Deshaun Watson trade. Let's continue to go on. This is another trade that was under the radar. 2021, Colts acquired Carson Wentz. Desperate for a quarterback help, the Colts traded a 3rd-round pick and a conditional 1st-round pick to Philadelphia for Wentz. Wentz went 9-8 as a starter, failing to make the playoffs, and fell out of favor with ownership and the coaching staff. He was traded to Washington the following season, where he also lasted 1 year. So you gave up a 1st-round pick and a 3rd-round pick for Carson Wentz, and he played 1 year for you, a 98 starter. That is a horrible trade. Again, by the way, the last 2 teams that made the bad picks that are being made, they're making them to get a quarterback. Remember what I said in the clip. In the clip, I told you when you have to have a quarterback, that's the going rate for a quarterback. When you don't have one, you reach, you stretch, you do whatever you can to get one, right? So we see already Russell Wilson was a reach for the Broncos. Now we see Carson Wentz is a reach for the Colts. But somehow, some way, even though the Browns have made the playoffs and these 2 haven't, somehow it's the worst trade in history. I'm going to say the best for last. Don't worry about it. We already know what's coming. Mitch Trubisky, 2018. The Bears dealt their first, third, and fourth round picks, as well as a third round pick selection in 2018 to San Francisco to move up one spot in 2017 draft for the rights of Mitch Trubisky. Not only did Trubisky struggle in 4 seasons with the team, but the Bears also bypassed Patrick Mahomes, Deshaun Watson in favor for the UNC alum, excuse me. As time goes on, the trade and draft choices look worse and worse for Chicago. Again, what position is this, boys and girls? Let's say all along, this is a quarterback. Remember what I just told you. If you don't have a quarterback, teams spend whatever they need to get one. And let's talk about Mitch Trubisky not being worth any of those picks and the opportunity cost that you left behind because you passed on Patrick Mahomes. But when we talk about the worst trade in history, D-Bush, the worst trade in history, by the way, all these quarterbacks fully got paid. So don't add the contract, because here's what happens when you're a quarterback. When you are a quarterback, you get all of that money because you make so much money that it's a dead cap hit if you do cut the person. And matter of fact, Russell Wilson, they had to eat all that cap too. So again, we don't hear nothing about this pick. We don't hear nothing about this being the worst pick ever. Let's continue to go on. I can still go. At the time, it looked like a great pick. 2012, Washington Redskins trade up for RG3. Targeting the Heisman Trophy winner, Griffin III, Washington sent 3 first-round selections and a second-rounder to the Rams, who were set at quarterback with former first-round pick Sam Bradford. The blockbuster move was ill-fated for Washington. RG3 hurt his knee at the end of his rookie season, leading to a downward spiral for his career. Never turned out to be anything other than a journeyman, and it pretty much derailed and debunked his situation. Once again, 3 first-round picks. No one talks about this. The only thing that saved them was the fact that they took a 4th-round pick and they drafted Kirk Cousins. And Kirk Cousins turned out to be a guy that had a better career than RG3. But no one talks about this. No one talks about what that looked like. Again, can we say it all again, boys and girls? This was a quarterback. So teams make bad decisions on trying to get quarterbacks all the time. We don't hear this as one of the worst trades ever. You know why? Because these guys don't have the level of baggage that is perceived to go with Deshaun Watson. That's all. That's exactly what it is. Let's go old school a little bit. Let's go old school. Ricky Williams, 1999. Y'all remember this? Desperate for a lead back, New Orleans Saints traded for a first, a third, a fourth, a fifth, a sixth, and a 7th rounder in 1999, along with first and third picks in 2000 to Washington for the 2nd overall pick, and that was the price to take Ricky Williams. Williams was a productive NFL back in his career as a running back, but played only 3 seasons with the Saints. He played 3 seasons with the Saints. His best years was in Miami. Again, we do not see nobody talking about this. Are you serious? Look at that draft capital. But the reason no one talks about it is because guess what? Hey, if somebody on ESPN says it, somebody on Fox says it, somebody on this says, then we all talk about how it's the worst trade ever. Let's continue down the yellow brick road, boys and girls. 1990, Vikings acquire Herschel Walker for 5 players and 8 draft picks. 5 players and 8 picks. Jimmy Johnson set up the Cowboys dynasty with unbelievable trade in 1990, moving star running back Herschel Walker and 4 draft picks to Minnesota for 5 players, 3 first-round picks, 3 second-round picks, a 3rd-round pick, and a 6th-round pick. Walker played only 2 seasons in Minnesota, and he failed to rush for 1,000 yards in either campaign. Stop talking to me about these dumb talking points, because when you do that, you lose credibility. It is nowhere near the worst trade in NFL history. Do you see what these people is going for? And not only the going rate, but the success level. They gave up all of that, and he never rushed for 1,000 yards. Never rushed for 1,000 yards. And let's finish this off right, because I couldn't remember his name in the previous clip. But why would I remember his name? He never plays, and he still don't play. Trey Lance. 49ers pulled the trigger on a monster trade with the Dolphins to move up to number 3 in the 2021 draft, where they selected North Dakota State quarterback Trey Lance. In the deal, they sent their 2021, 2022, 2023 first-round picks, along with a 2022 compensatory third-round selection, which it turned out to be number 102 overall. And the ripple effects from the deal will continue for years depending on how the 49ers fare and what happens with those picks that they traded. Well, no one brings this up because guess what? The 49ers went to the Super Bowl. The 49ers found Brock Purdy. The 49ers still got Christian McCaffrey. Tell me somebody that the 49ers didn't get because they traded all these picks for Trey Lance. Not only did they not get, they got Deebo Samuels, they got Ayuk, they still got Bosa, they still got, come on. They went out and got Christian McCaffrey. Trent Williams is on that squad. Let's keep it real. Are they really hurt? No. This trade is by far worse than what's going on with Deshaun Watson. Because you know why? At least Deshaun Watson went 5-1 last year. Deshaun Watson has only played 11 games. Trey Lance was so bad that they couldn't even get him on the field when Jimmy Garoppolo and Journeyman were there. So at the end of the day, I just want to keep going back to this and debunk this a little bit, because we continue to do this every single time we talk about Deshaun Watson, and it's lazy. It's lazy talking points. By the way, there's hundreds of more trades that I passed over just to talk about these few. This is just a few. Just a few. Oh, and if you believe so, in the comment section below, hit me up. Let me know why you believe that it's the worst trade. Because I just don't see it. I just don't see it. Maybe I'm looking into the wrong spot.